people who want to follow the Mediterranean diet but are not chefs or not, looking for 50 ingredients. And that's me too. I'm a cook, but I used to hate cooking. I used to be so intimidated by getting in the kitchen and cooking. And so that's why my mom laughs at me. She's like, "You wrote a cookbook?" And I'm like, "I did." Because I would call her and I'd be like, "Okay, when you're roasting a chicken, what side do you put up? I can never remember." And she's like, "Oh my gosh." So yeah, so the inspiration for recipes came from everywhere. A lot for this book came. My husband and I have been very lucky to travel. We've been, all over the world, and every time we go, my favorite thing to do is eat.
Okay.
And I like to write in a journal some of the traditional cuisines of the places that we're going, and just our favorite dishes and the ingredients that were in there. So a lot of them from this book were taken from that.
Cool.
We went to this amazing trip to Greece, and I wrote like pages and pages about how I loved the flatbread and the souvlaki and the tzatziki, and those are all in the book. So I took a lot from the travel journals, and then a lot are just kind of, I wanted to take recipes that I personally grew up with, and then kind of put like a Mediterranean diet spin on it. So
Okay.
showing how you can kind of take recipes that you may eat and not necessarily think of as Mediterranean, and switch them up just a little bit, change a few ingredients, and make them more kind of Mediterranean diet inspired.
Well, the other thing that I liked about your book was because we always say the Mediterranean diet is a lifestyle, and the Mediterranean Diet Roundtable, we're a community, right, of aficionados of the diet. But you put in your book some simple guidelines for how to follow the diet, and I loved on page 14, if those of you who have the book, you just talked about, here's what you do daily: have your fruits and vegetables. Here's what you do often: eat your fish and seafood. Here's what you should do on a moderate basis: poultry and eggs and cheese and red wine. And then, fine, occasionally have some red meat and sweets. But the two recipes that I chose today, I chose to fit into what I say my nutrition goals are, right? And one of my nutrition goals is to eat more fish. And let me tell you why. I grew up in the Midwest, right? We don't have access to fish here. And during Lent, we had fish every Friday,
Mm-hmm.
but we had fish sticks. I don't know if you know what a fish stick is,
Oh
right?
yes,
That was my idea till I was an adult of what fish was. And it wasn't
yes.
until I went to Boston in one of my first professional conferences that I think I had this blackened tuna kebab at a seaside restaurant. And I said, oh, that's what fish is supposed to
Yeah,
taste like, right? So,
mine
so I'm
is
trying to
similar.
go
Yeah.
to more fish in my diet. So I asked you what you would recommend, and you recommended this almond sesame crusted salmon. So tell me about that recipe.
So this one was kind of, when I was writing the book, I had to submit the entire table of contents first before even doing anything. And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
well, I don't know. So I knew I wanted a salmon recipe, but I wanted it to be kind of different from the salmon recipes everywhere. Salmon with herbs or salmon with lemon and salmon with white wine and butter. Nothing wrong with any of those. Those are some of my favorite recipes, but I wanted something different. So I thought of a salmon recipe that's easy. And it doesn't have a lot of ingredients. It's maybe 6 ingredients
Right.
total. And also kind of takes a lot of those principles of the Mediterranean diet, include more nuts and seeds, use olive oil, don't use as much salt, use herbs instead. So I kind of made all of that into this sesame and almond crusted salmon that's served with a little bit of honey and garlic and olive oil. And it's one of my favorites. And I think if for somebody that doesn't like cook with a lot of fish, I think it's a great recipe to start with.
Well, I have to agree with you. I mean, for me, um, I was tempted. So it's a very simple recipe. You buy 4 salmon fillets and you put the sesame and the almonds on them. And I kept saying, where's the salt, right? But there's no salt in this recipe. I was tempted to add it, but I'm like, no, follow the recipe. And then you simply grill it. I mean, you simply put it on the top of the stove, right? And then you flip it. So the other thing about this is that I'm the food safety dietitian, right?
Yeah.
So I always say, don't trust your senses, but you gave us minutes, which I like. So 5 minutes and then flip it. And then I tested it, and it was exactly 145 degrees, which I don't know what that is, centigrade, 63 maybe, which is exactly safe and exactly perfectly well done. But you delivered because it was easy. It was easy
Yeah.
to do. And the other thing was, my friend that I shared it with is mildly hypertensive. So, he doesn't want the salt. And he said it was delicious. He also doesn't have a sweet tooth. So he said he didn't even think it needed the honey garlic
Honey.
topping. But I liked that. But I'll tell you when I really liked it, because I don't waste food either, right? So I only had one of my fillets of the four, and I had the second one the next day. And of course, reheated fish is never as good, but it was delicious. But that's where that garlic honey dressing, I think, really helped when I used the leftovers. So there was no waste. So let me tell you how simple this was, and don't laugh at me. So here were my two minor challenges, right? The first one was I couldn't find my sesame seeds, and I knew I bought them, but I put them in the fridge because they had gone rancid once when I bought them before. So that wasn't you, that was on me. And then the second one was chopping up the almonds, and that's because I tried to put them in my little food processor.
Oh yeah.
And you know how my food processor was broken, and you know how I broke it? I had this brick of hard brown sugar that I was determined not to waste, but it was like cement. And I tried to put it in this tiny food processor the day before, and I cracked the food processor. So I had to chop the almonds by hand. But really, that's how simple and delicious this recipe is. Find your sesame seeds and you can chop the almonds by hand.
There you go.
Great. All right, so the next one, though, is a really fun recipe, I thought. Okay, and it was called, it's the first recipe in your book, right? It was called Spicy Shakshuka Skillet. So we're trying to make this, we're trying to make this accessible to everybody. So I asked 10 people, and I didn't give them a hint about that it was about cooking. I said, do you know what shakshuka is? And nobody really knew it in my circle. But somebody guessed the dance, and I thought that sounded right? Shakshuka sounds like you should shimmy when you say it. So we have spicy shakshuka skillet, and I chose it because it was like for breakfast. Your book is divided into day parts, or morning, noon, evening, and snacks. And I like spicy food, but I don't like them in the morning. And I have one Mediterranean friend that said, don't choose that. Mediterraneans don't eat breakfast. And I'm like, what? No, yes, they do. So tell me about spicy shakshuka skillet.
So it's so funny. I love the way that you say that, shakshuka.
How could you not say shakshuka?
I know. And it's so funny, it actually translates into like shaken or like loosely stirred. So I feel like that goes along with the dance. Like,
yes, you're right.
Yes. Yeah. It's funny. So in California, it's pretty popular here, like on brunch menus, those brunches where you go and it's like they charge an astronomical price for something that they deem a little bit fancy, or they put avocado on and they can charge you more. But I actually had it first in Greece, and we had it actually for dinner. And so I was talking to this wonderful woman that owns this restaurant. We were in Greece one time, and she just sat at the table with us and was eating with us. And she said that it kind of goes like, so the Mediterranean diet is hard to pinpoint because there's like 16 countries that make up
exactly.
Thing. So there's dishes that they say like, oh, this originated in the Middle East, and shakshuka is very popular in the Middle East. But then like other places will be like, no, in North Africa, they've had it for so long. And it's different from every region where you go. Kind of they put their own little traditional like spin on it. So in Greece, she said that it is a breakfast dish, but they traditionally serve it at night. Okay. And that it originated and it was so popular because it's very budget friendly. It's eggs, it's tomatoes, and it's spicy. So, and it's kind of like that kind of dish where you serve it in a skillet and you can dip some bread into it. So it's just very homely, and anybody could enjoy it. And it wasn't ingredients that were expensive or anything like that. So basically, going back to the recipe, it's like a spicy tomato sauce, and then you kind of poach the eggs in the tomato sauce when you're cooking it.
Exactly.
And then it has like some herbs and some seasonings and things like that. So it's one of my favorites. My kids love it. They think it's funny, that you have to dig the egg out of the tomato sauce. So I think it's just easy.
Well, and that's, we can talk a little bit more about this, since as my experience shows, people in the Midwest don't know what shakshuka is. You take these canned tomatoes. I use the canned tomatoes. And one quick question. I didn't know if I should cut them or leave them whole. I left them whole.
I leave them whole.
Okay.
I think it's up to, I think it's up
So that was just a quick question I had for you. And then you add like cumin and cayenne and red pepper flakes on it. And then once it bubbles, right, you put the eggs on top. So my other question was, what size pan? And one of the things I really liked about your cookbook was the photos. Now, and let me tell you why. Have you ever heard of Bob Ross?
Yes. Oh my
Bob
gosh,
Ross,
my
the
kids are
painter,
obsessed
right?
with Bob
So
Ross.
you can
Yes.
paint, you can learn to
Happy
paint
Little
along
Tree.
this book.
Yeah.
I feel like your cookbook is kind of like the Bob Ross of cookbooks for us beginners, because I actually went to that page and I looked at your picture and I went to my pans and I'm like, okay, it looks like the 10-inch pan will work, because I didn't know if I could use the 10-inch pan or if I had to go and get my behemoth cast iron pan, right?
The big
The
one.
one that I
big
have to get the
one.
luggage
Yeah.
cart or run a forklift to get in, to the kitchen. But I think because this is Mediterranean diet made easy, the pictures really help. So it helped me make that simple decision as to what size pan do I use. So the 10
Yeah, and that's a good point.
pan
And
worked
that's
well.
something I'll have to remember for next time. And I appreciate all that feedback, because I use it too. Like, I'll get cookbooks and I'll get so frustrated because I'm like, oh, it says a pinch of this. Well, how much is a pinch? I don't know, or
But you
stir
have
to,
creativity, right?
you
can
know,
do
like
a little.
rendering. Well, what is something rendering? So that's good feedback.
No. It's not a criticism. It's just a tip for
No,
our
not at
listeners,
all.
right? So that somebody like me, you don't have to think twice about the pan now, you know. The other thing that I thought was interesting was not a challenge, but cracking the eggs, right? Cracking the eggs. So when I was an intern, we used to crack thousands of eggs every morning because we cooked for this entire hospital. And back then, I was really good at it. I got to one-handed egg cracking, no shells. But egg cracking is not like riding a bike. So I had to kind of relearn. I was very careful to crack these eggs onto this shimmering shakshuka. And I did pretty good. I didn't break a yolk, and I only had one little chip that I had to fish out. So that was very careful, but if you're gentle, you can make that happen. And then when you're done on the stove, you preheat your oven to 400 and you put this bubbling skillet in it to finish it off, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
And I'm going to tell you one other thing that helped me a lot was Alexa, because she's like in my kitchen, right? My hands free. And this is a recipe where every minute makes a difference because you're working with
eggs. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and you don't have to worry because, again, you want to keep your hands sanitary as much as you can, off your phone, off your alarm clock, off your timer. So I set the alarm, I think it was 5 minutes in the oven. But when I opened my oven, and granted, this is my oven and all ovens are different, those eggs were still transparent. There was no way I was eating them.
Yeah.
I'm an over easy girl, okay? So I'm not a poached egg girl.
Yeah.
So I'm an over easy girl. So I put them in for another minute and I checked it again. I think in my kitchen, I cooked them for 8 minutes.
Okay.
And it probably was a little longer than most people would like it. But again, that's how I prefer it. And when I took them out, I checked the temperature and they were perfect. So eggs, to be safe for everybody, should it be about 145 or about 60 degrees, right? Depending Fahrenheit or Celsius. Now you can eat them under that, but from your food service days and from my food service days, when you serve them below that temperature, you have to put the advisory, right? Eating raw or undercooked foods can be harmful for your health. Now, the only reason I mention that is you talked about how this is a low cost food. And really, like the salmon was $10 that I bought, but these eggs were $1.20. And I used half of the recipe. So I've got 60 grams of protein or something like that for 60 cents. I mean, it was really good, high quality protein and a very low cost recipe. And it's vegetarian. Yeah. I mean, so it just serves all those nutrition needs. And you said your kids like it.
They do, yeah. They think it's fun to like try to get a spoon and pull the egg out, and they love it. They think it's hilarious that there's eggs cooked. Like, first of all, they're like eggs in the oven, and so they love it. And anything that has a sauce they can dip their bread into, they think it's amazing.
So I, as I mentioned, when I cooked the salmon, I had a guest, so we could cook it up. But I hate to waste food. All right, that's just part of one of my goals is not to waste food. But I was Sunday afternoon, so I kind of made it as a brunch dish, but I was alone and I couldn't eat,
all that
round pound of shakshuka. So I think I had a two egg serving that day. And so I put it in the refrigerator because I didn't know what else to do with it.